So the next topic is ray tracing. The new consoles have ray tracing.
Yeah.
What do we think ray tracing gives the gamer or the consumer, or the devs get? And really, how is this going to impact the PC space? Because that's where it all started, let's be honest. It didn't start with the
Yeah.
consoles, it started in the PC space. So.
I mean, I guess ray tracing, has a multiple sets of purposes, right? One, I guess, is the visual quality, the accuracy you get from a reflection of light, an ambience of light and other things that kind of apply to it. So it gives you kind of that realism, more immersiveness, I guess. The interesting thing, I think, with the devs is that whether it actually makes their development cycle quicker, I think, is the question, right? Whether this actually improves the amount of workarounds they have to do versus just relying on on ray tracing and the APIs that come with it. So maybe there's a good side to that, where the dev cycles of producing good performant AAA titles, etc., are easier. I know there's a performance hit, but your hardware is probably handling that. But if it improves the software cycle, maybe that's a worthwhile thing longer term.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think it's still a technology that needs a lot of maturing. Because you're right about the performance here, even with hardware. In the PC space, I mean, I guess if you're used to above 100 FPS, then ray tracing at high resolution it's not good. With these new consoles, obviously, console players have been so used to 30 FPS that having ray tracing, high fidelity, high resolutions at 60 FPS is wonderful. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I kind of think the way the ray tracing is at the moment, it doesn't help devs at all. The whole kind of end state of ray tracing is full path ray tracing.
Yeah.
So you kind of move away from the way we do things traditionally, just is rasterization, where you convert 3D geometry, and it literally is 3D geometry in terms of math, right? Into
a 2D visual.
a load of pixels. Yeah, effectively a load
Yeah.
of pixels. And that still happens, obviously. We're only partially using ray tracing, stuff like reflections, stuff like shadows, and only for part of the scene, not the whole scene. And equally, ray tracing being so resource and system heavy, you're giving people a means to switch it off and go back to the traditional means of doing reflections like screen space reflections.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, whilst the end state would be to make it easier for developers to manage graphics features and whatnot, we're actually giving them more work with ray tracing.
Oh yeah, in the short term,
Yeah.
having to support both rasterization and all the shortcuts you need to make it kind of work.
Yeah,
versus RT and trying to make RT performant. It's almost like 4 times the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it just feels like a lot of work. I don't know if the engines will go some ways helping this situation, but I'm not a games developer. But right now, yeah, I don't necessarily think it helps developers at all. I mean, aside from maybe helping them to basically understand and develop knowledge and experience with ray tracing. So when we get to a point where we can do ray tracing without the kind of performance hit we've got now and it's full path, we don't have to, deal with reflections by baking reflections into the art or whatever else, then it's a different story. Definitely a different story. So, but as for what I think it gives the gamer or consumer, it's another bit of fidelity. I must admit, I'm not exactly sold on ray tracing. I think it looks nice. Don't get me wrong, but you can also do without it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have it, but if it wasn't there, I'd probably still play the game, if you know what I mean. And
yeah. And you'd probably sacrifice that fidelity for 60 frames, right? If you couldn't get 60.
You definitely would. You definitely would. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I think, again, going back to getting my hands on a PS5, right, and this is such a silly thing, right? Because in the early days of consoles, 60 frames per second used to be the norm, and then I think from the PS3 days, Xbox 360 onwards, things start to go back to 30.
Yeah. When they couldn't handle the graphics that were being pushed out, then a lot of 30 frames per second things started reoccurring again. And you can feel it. You can feel the difference when you're looking at the game between the clunkiness of 30 versus 60.
Yeah, you definitely can. I mean, I remember recently getting God of War on PS4, running on PS5, and you obviously have the PS Pro modes there, so you can either prioritize frame rate or prioritize graphics fidelity and resolution. So when that happened, I kind of went in, you run it in backwards compatibility with PS4 Pro, tried it at, try it at high frame rate, tried it at high fidelity. I picked the frame rate every day of the week. You could just visibly see one was smoother than the other, but I really did struggle to see graphics fidelity. One being, close to full 4K, let's say, is probably checkerboarding, and one not. You know what I mean? And they've actually released, I think, an update to God of War, so you can have both. So I mean, that only happened, I think, last week. 60 frames a second. For me, it trumps kind of whether you have ray tracing or not. That's the way you should really play. I mean, any day of the week, I think.
Yeah.
And the consoles having ray tracing is only going to be good for PC gamers. Because at the end of the day, right? I mean, ray tracing started in the PC space. The uptick.
But is there? Yeah, I'm thinking, is there other advantages though? All the stuff that how do I say, animations and Pixar and all those sorts of guys. Surely this shouldn't be able to make their lives a bit easier.
I don't know. I don't know that it does, because we're at the moment using ray tracing in what I'd say is a very limited way. We're not rendering the full scene with it. It's a reflection. It's part of the scene. Certainly for gaming, it's not the advantage. I mean, in terms of Pixar and animation and all that sort of stuff, because that's offline rendering. It's not real-time rendering. On the fly rendering.
Yeah, but I think that it doesn't feed into a cycle of, because they have to, they're manipulating the models, etc. They have to, there's probably like I'm guessing, right? I don't know animation in the world, but it's probably an overnight batch, and then they go and watch it the next morning.
Yeah.
And then they probably do further tweaks off the back of it.
The animation guys, the rendering guys, the offline rendering guys, they've been ray tracing for as long as I can remember.
Oh yeah, but overnight versus real time, right? If you can imagine, if they can live with. That's what I'm saying. It's the difference. The advantage.
Remember, they've probably got supercomputers to deal with this sort of stuff, not graphics cards. At worst, they've probably got kind of like clusters and clusters of high-end graphics cards to deal with this sort of stuff. But yeah, take your point. If we could get that good at ray tracing, the standard gamer and consumer, imagine how that would translate to what these guys are doing in terms of movies and media and all that.
Yeah. You could just be able to make movies from in-game engines.
And to a degree, that's happening. Because Unreal Engine, it seems to have foot in the door for that sort of thing now. It's not only just the games engine, they're doing media and movies, so it's happening.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting space, actually.
Yeah.
I think we will need to talk about that, because I was dread impressed with the Unreal Engine.
I'm going to add it to the list. Yeah, and I still need to experience ray tracing, so I've not played with it yet. But again, I prefer performance over fidelity.
Yeah, I've used it in PC and consoles now. I mean, first time was probably with Metro. Recently, it's been with PS5, and so I've kind of used it with, ironically, not Spider-Man, because even though I've got it, I've not actually kind of booted it up. Yeah, it was Control.
That was already a good-looking game already.
Definitely. I mean, and PSN actually gave the ultimate version of Control free with PSN subscribers, which was actually pretty good. But yeah, just looks pretty good, runs pretty well.
Yeah.
But again, I just kind of think, would I pick 60 frames over and above ray tracing every day of the week? No doubt about that.
Yeah. And I think the 30 series of NVIDIA cards do allow you to, in some games, to do that. Not all the latest ones, but majority of, well, maybe most, I would say.
Yeah, I think they've really upped the game in terms of kind of ray trace performance, and I mean, and that's definitely where the new batch of AMD graphics cards are lagging behind. Not so much on rasterization. I think rasterization, they're very close, but in terms of ray tracing, they're definitely behind, quite easily behind. In terms of and again, that kind of goes into the whole kind of upscaling technology, with DLSS.
Yeah.
To be honest, if it works as well as they say it does, and I've had limited exposure to it, then the reality is it's a real game changer for a lot of different areas. So, I mean, you could imagine a handheld with DLSS type of technology, low-powered handheld, able to kind of churn out great level of fidelity.
Yeah.
Based on that, probably be low-powered as well. helps with battery life, blah 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 blah. So on it goes. There's a lot of advantages to it. I mean, I'm sure the consoles will be using it if they want longevity.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about graphics card manufacturers how they would perceive this. I mean, right now it's a marketing thing because DLSS has got such traction in terms of mind share. They're gonna want it. But to me, right,
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
have widespread adoption, that kind of means to me, right, that the longevity of graphics cards is going to basically be extended.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. If DLSS as a technique continues to vastly improve, then the need to upgrade beyond where we're at with the latest series, it just
Yeah.
diminishes, right? And again, maybe beyond 4K just doesn't make any sense. So yeah.
PS4 Pro used checkerboard rendering, and it had kind of like hardware inbuilt for that, where you can compare one frame to the other. I've never understood why that wasn't made more popular. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there's some sort of upscaling in these new consoles as well.
Oh yeah.
I've seen proof of that. I mean, looking
Yeah.
at Horizon Zero Dawn, when you compared the base PS4 version on a 4K television versus the PS5 backwards compatible PS4 Pro version, the image quality is real chalk and cheese, in my view anyway, from what I could see with my naked eye.
Yeah. Sounds like we need to push Digital Foundry to do something.
Yeah, they've probably already done it. We probably just need to look it up. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be surprised if they hadn't.
Yeah.
I should by all rights be playing, Miles Morales, the Spider-Man game.
Hmm.
That's had been patched, and that's actually got a 4K 60 FPS ray trace mode.
Yeah.
And with that said, let's move on to what's going to be our last topic of this podcast.